rolling tumors to roaring lampooners, the Tigers on a Roll show starts in 3, 2, 1.
A very good Sunday afternoon to all of the Auburn family tuning in today. Welcome back to Tigers on a Roll, your podcast for everything Auburn sports. Please remember to like, share, subscribe here on YouTube, and continue the conversation over on X and Instagram at Tigers on a Roll. Well, all right, folks. This is why we love the SEC. This is why we love SEC football. We witnessed one of the most chaotic Saturdays of the season so far. And these games, some of these games, the big games from yesterday, fog up the picture for the top SEC teams that are in the hunt for both the SEC championship and the college football playoff. The roadmap was balled up and thrown in a blender, and we're going to try to break down the fallout from yesterday. Who's in, who's out, what are the new paths to Atlanta and the 12-team playoff. And then we're going to bring it home to the Plains. Auburn was on a bye, obviously, but a big decision needs to be made in that football facility. Is the program going to decide to start Deuce Knight in the Mercer game? Do they start the Deuce Knight era? That is the question that they need to answer as early as possible this week while preparing for Mercer to come to town. But first, let's reset the board. Yesterday, madness, certainly. Biggest shockwave of the day, which everyone watching this podcast is going to be happy about. Number 11, Oklahoma, goes into T-Town and beats number 4, Alabama at their place, which they have not lost a homecoming game since like 2001. So yesterday was absolutely insane. Alabama at home, SEC and CFP hopes on the line, lose it to Oklahoma and Jamatir. This is their first conference loss of the year, but it's their second loss of the season, and the Tide are now 8-2. And we will talk about what that means for them in a minute. But keep track of the number of losses that these teams have, because you almost had an absolute travesty down in Kyle Field. Almost. But Texas A&M, number 3 Texas A&M, was down 30-3 against South Carolina, and they came all the way back. 31-30, final score of that game. Unbelievable season-saving comeback that keeps the Aggies undefeated at 10-0. They are the clear undisputed kings of the conference right now. A couple of their offensive starters got banged up. I believe it was a wide receiver and their running back, but it won't be like a Jordan Travis scenario as far as we're talking about the CFP and whatnot with this. But they're both expected to be fine. But things like that you got to keep in mind as we wrap up the season, because obviously the committee looks at that kind of stuff. And then you had 2 other big SEC powers that survived. They survived the third to last Saturday of the season. Number 7, Ole Miss held off a very scrappy Florida team, 34-24, and then number 5, Georgia absolutely boat race number 10, Texas, 35-10. And this is our first year with the new divisionless SEC. So the race right now is for the first 2 spots in the conference based on record. Well, we'll get into that. But first 2 spots, it's not just best in the East, best in the West. So which makes the easy part of that. There's 2 spots that everyone's fighting for. The easy spot is the number 1 spot. Who that belongs to? That's Texas A&M. 10-0 on the season, 7-0 in the SEC. They control their destiny. And if they win their last SEC game, they're number 1 seed in Atlanta, period. But looking at the number 2 spot, that's where it starts to get wild. We've got 3 teams right now vying for that second spot. The one that I think it's in, Georgia, 9-1 on the season, 7-1 in the SEC. The Bulldogs are my most likely team to get in. And their win over Texas, number 10 ranked Texas, was their last SEC game of the season. So they are 7-1 in the conference, period, end of story. Their schedule is done. Now they get to go sit on the couch and watch these other guys, Bama and Ole Miss, play it out and see how their seasons go. And speaking of Bama, 8-2 on the season, 6-1 in the SEC. And despite the loss last night, they are still alive. They're still alive. 6-1 in the conference is obviously competitive. But their last game, their last conference game, 2 weeks from now when they come to Auburn for the Iron Bowl. And if Bama loses that game, they are absolutely cooked. Absolutely cooked. Season is over in their eyes. There's no question about that. But if they manage to beat Auburn, then they're going to tie UGA for a conference record. And now Alabama wins that head-to-head matchup because they beat UGA in Athens at the end of September. But Alabama's season comes down to a night game in Jordan-Hare against an Auburn team that not only is their biggest rival and hates their guts, but they want to go to a bowl game just as bad as Bama does. Like this is not an easy task. And if Bama loses a game, just mark it up. Georgia, Texas A&M in that SEC championship game. The Bama players might freaking opt out of the bowl game, man. That's how bad that their season can get if they lose another one of these games. And the next one they could lose is to Auburn. And then we've got Ole Miss. Ole Miss, 10-1 on a heater. Lane Kiffin knows it. 10-1, 6-1 in the SEC. The Rebels are in the exact same boat as Bama. They are 6-1 in the conference, and they have an SEC game left. They're likely to win the Egg Bowl, but like any rivalry game, which is I was just talking about with the Iron Bowl, it's hard to predict what's going to happen until the final whistle blows and you see what happened. If Ole Miss can win that game, win the Egg Bowl, then they will also be 7-1 in the conference. So what happens? What happens if Ole Miss and Bama both win? That's a 3-way tie in the conference for 7-1 teams between Georgia, Alabama, and Ole Miss. It comes down to the criteria here, which is it's the multi-team tiebreaker rule. So it looks at your head-to-head records if you've played, which Georgia and Bama have, obviously, and then records against common opponents. And it's simply just going to be a math problem. And if Alabama wins that game and Ole Miss wins that game, Georgia's in a good spot, but they're completely powerless. They're completely powerless, and it is just going to come down to filling in the equation here on who is quote-unquote deserving of going to this game. And that's what happens when you muddy up the waters like this with the way the schedules are and not having divisions. And it's going to be really interesting, and it's obviously a lot of fun to watch, and stuff like last night. I'm never going to complain about hate watching an Alabama game that they actually lose. Love that. But it makes it difficult here for some of these teams who are all deserving to get in to a championship game where you obviously only have two teams playing. And A&M is clearing away the best team in the conference, and then you've got three teams vying for essentially, 1B. So we'll see how that shakes out, and we will see how Ole Miss and Alabama are able to handle their rivalry week games. But going to the 12, that's just the SEC championship picture. If you look at the 12-team college football playoff, A&M's a lock, of course, and they're probably going to get a top 2 seed with the first round bye. Georgia and Ole Miss as one-loss teams are certainly in a prime position for at-large bids. And in fact, Georgia's win yesterday probably guarantees that they will at least host a first-round playoff game in Sanford Stadium. But you have Alabama. The loss to OU was an absolute killer for them. A 2-loss team in this day and age of the CFP and the way the college football is panning out with the Power 4 conferences, their path to get in is razor thin. They have no margin for error whatsoever. And they need to beat Auburn just to stay in the conversation. They probably need to win the SEC championship to get a relatively good seed for the CFP in general. But they absolutely have to beat Auburn to even stay relevant, or else they're going to a New Year's Six bowl, or probably I'm not. Who even knows where they would end up? But an 8-2 Bama team that loses the Iron Bowl is done. Their season is over. And there's a lot of positive sentiment around here in the midst of the Auburn fans that certainly suggests a refreshed Auburn team with nothing to lose is going to be the nail in the coffin for Alabama's season. And like I said, if Alabama goes 8-3 and they miss their CFP expectations and things like that, don't be surprised if half their team sits out of the bowl game. And then Kalen DeBoer is on the hot seat for having what in their minds, in their, recency bias, I guess, we'll say the last decade or so. But before that, man, they're talking about firing coaches going 8-3, 2 years in, 2 or 3 years in. Absolutely crazy stuff. But anyway, before we talk about, we're going to wrap that up. We're going to keep an eye on that. But before we talk about that, the Deuce Knight situation, let's get a word from our sponsors. Brahma Marketing is your one-stop shop for everything from signs and apparel to high-impact vehicle wraps. As a certified 3M's graphic company, they guarantee quality and durability. They've partnered with Greystar Real Estate, Prisma Health, HD Supply, and more. Stop blending in and start standing out. Visit BrahmaMarketing.com to get started on your next project. War Eagle from the Orlando Auburn Club. Are you an Auburn alum or fan living in the Orlando area? This is more than just a club. It's your official connection to the Auburn family right here in Central Florida. The club hosts watch parties and networking events for past, current, and future Tigers and their families. Find them on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and online at orlandooburnclub.org. All right, give me one moment here. All right, well, let's bring things back closer to home, because I actually don't ever want to talk about the Tide or any of our rivals in the SEC on this show in any positive light and hoping that they make any sort of championship game, so forget them. We're going to bring it back to the Plains, and unfortunately Auburn obviously is in the position where they're 4-6 on the season right now, but they're coming off a bye week, and in a season full of losing winnable games with players that are way better than how they're being utilized, Auburn is in a very, very odd predicament now that Jackson Arnold hadn't worked out on the Plains, and Ashton Daniels wants to come back next season, and we've got a 5-star quarterback in the room who may need to step in. Auburn must win its last 2 games. You've got one against Mercer next Saturday and another one at home against Alabama in the Iron Bowl at the end of November, just to be bowl eligible. The game against Mercer, who's an FCS opponent, is usually a cupcake tune-up game, but this year the team needs to look at it completely differently. The 2025 season is for all intents and purposes over. The only thing that matters now is the future. And they need to treat Mercer as a launch pad for this program going into signing day, potentially with a new coach, obviously with a new coach, spring ball, keeping these rooms together, and getting to know what next fall's team is going to look like. They need to decide on whether or not you start the 5-star true freshman, Deuce Knight, against Mercer, or if you burn Ashton's red shirt and effectively end his college career. Just to win the game against Mercer. Deuce played in one game, one drive, against Ball State early in the season, and he went 2 for 5, and I think he put the ball on the ground 2 or 3 times, and he almost threw a pick. He can play, obviously, in the last 2 games and maintain his red shirt. But it is time to try to put him back on. We have not seen him since, and it is time to put him back on the field, because this is a free look at Deuce Knight in what he can do against competition that he should be better than, and the other starters, which he did not play with against Ball State. With the starters out there, the ones out there, and Deuce Knight at the helm, you got to see for free, low pressure scenario for Deuce what happens? Well, what happens? Cons are, the argument is simple. You lose the game. This team needs to win the next 2 games to keep this season going. Ashton just played the best game of his season, their last time out on the field before the bye week. And normally, any functioning football program, you ride the hot hand. You don't need to experiment with these players when a bowl game is on the line. And what if you put Deuce out there behind an offensive line that has struggled to pass block and he plays poorly against an FCS team? You could shatter his confidence before he even gets started at Auburn. And then you'd be walking on eggshells in the quarterback room for a whole nother offseason after just doing that with Jackson Arnold, trying to rebuild his confidence from an absolutely abysmal showing at Oklahoma when he started his college career. Now, the least likely con, but still something that's possible whenever you are on the field, is you just cannot risk the quarterback of your future getting hurt in a meaningless game. Especially with the incredibly physical Iron Bowl looming and Auburn's entire quarterback room having a propensity to run the ball. Those are the cons. Here's the pros. And this is where I'm at, honestly. This is where I'm at. And I think it's overwhelming, is you have got to do it. It is a free game. It costs you absolutely nothing. You get the fans excited. The players want to play with Deuce. And he can play in still red shirt. And then Ashton maintains his red shirt. And so you know what? Even if they don't stick around, at least you gave them, some deference. And then they can continue their college career in a healthy way. Instead of just going out there like Damari Alston and just chopping them down at the knees. Anyway, it's the perfect low-risk environment to get him real live reps. And who cares about a 6-6 season and another freaking trip to the Birmingham Bowl? Great if we do. Don't care if we don't at this point. But this decision is about Auburn's future as a program in 2026 and beyond that. And the only way to start the future is to get your future leader experience now. And the single biggest reason for me is that Deuce Knight was the centerpiece of this recruiting class, his recruiting class. And you've got superstars on the outside like Cam and Perry, and I'm almost positive Eric could come back if he wants to, of course. And they're sticking around. I think they're sticking around to play with Deuce. You get rid of a head coach that was preventing the offense from achieving its, maximum efficiency and what it could be. And then you've got the transfer portal coming up because as soon as we hire a new coach full-time, you have a special portal, and then you also have the January portal on top of that. And you want to keep this roster together so that you don't have to go to the portal for everything. And you want to keep the recruiting class from Deuce's year together because those kids are just getting their feet under them at Auburn. And if you want to show the receivers in this room, these guys that are like, you got Cam as a 5-star plus. You've got Eric sitting there as the number 1 receiver in the transfer portal last season. And Perry, who I believe was a 4-move to 5-star. Like, you've got these Freeze 5 guys, Freeze 4 guys. Like, you want to prove to them that this program is on the up and up and actually show it on the field is you start Deuce Knight. You show them that there is a plan with Deuce for the future, and they will buy into it. You hand Deuce Knight the keys to this program, and you send a message to every single player in that locker room, every recruit that is visiting campus, and every fan that continues to show up to these games during these 6-6 seasons that the real future starts now. You let Deuce go out there against the FCS opponent in Mercer and let him show the world, and more importantly, his teammates, why he was the guy that we spent all this money on and all this time recruiting, and that we were able to pull away from Notre Dame and all these graphics and fanfare and everything. Yost let him show them why he was that guy. If he plays well, he energizes the entire program and the fan base. He gives the fans hope, and he gives these freshmen a reason to stick around. on the offensive side of the ball, which is the one where there's the most questions, because I think DJ Durkin maintains his role on this staff next season. The 2020, this season is a wash. So these decisions you shouldn't be making these decisions about 2025. It's about 26 and 27 and 28 and keeping the wheels on this program going into next year after having to rebuild this, what the faces of these program will look like, and the head coach. And can only imagine the offensive coordinator and all kinds of other guys that you're going to need to bring in to fill holes that are definitely going to, they're definitely going to open up because of the turmoil that this program's been in. So I think you have to play him. And honestly, without Hugh Freeze making up plays on the fly, I think Deuce has a legitimate chance to play really well. As long as him and Nick stay on the same page, he's a young gun and he needs to be put in a position to succeed, which this matchup is the best shot at that. And my question to you is, am I wrong? Well, what would you do? What are you saying? What are the conversations you're having? Start Knight, stick with Ashton Daniels to keep him in action through the Iron Bowl? Like, who do you think? Like, who do you want to see? Who do you want to see? Not even what you think they should do. Who do you want to see? And also, who do you think gets the second spot in the SEC championship game? I mean, there's no talent right now. Comment below. Let me know your thoughts on X at Tigers on a Roll. We just started an Instagram page too. Go check that Instagram page out at Tigers on a Roll. And speaking of Tigers on a Roll, don't forget that the Tigers basketball team plays at 3 today. Huge game against number 1 Houston. That game actually starts in about 30 minutes, probably 10 minutes from the time this video is posted on YouTube. But tune into that on ESPN. And speaking of, let's get out of here. That's going to be all the time that we have for today. Let's go get ready to watch Auburn, number 22 Auburn, beat number 1 Houston in Birmingham at Legacy Arena. Until next time, War Eagle, and we'll see you.